Kia ora, my name is Robbie and I'm another white man behind a desk, and we're coming to you from Circa Theatre with our very own live studio audience! That's right, that is them. They're basically the same crowd we had at Bats, only this crowd was born 30 years earlier. It's election year, and that means one thing. It's time to talk about immigration. New Zealanders care very deeply about immigration. According to Labour's General Secretary, immigration is currently the fourth most important issue for New Zealand voters. For comparison, number 5 on that list is the entire economy. I can only assume that number 6 is the human race or the Milky Way. So with immigration looming so large in the hearts and minds of Kiwi voters, we've decided it must be either very good or very bad. And in this episode, we're going to find out which one it is. Now, that might seem like quite a big job, but don't worry, we are confident that we can give you the snappy, shareable content that you've come to expect from white man behind a desk. Yes, we have dug up some long, there's even some long, boring research about immigration, but we're not going to read it, okay? Because that would take too much time, okay? We're just gonna do what Winston Peters would do. Because how could that possibly go wrong? We'll use our common sense, okay? And I guarantee you that we will decide if immigration is very good or very bad in the next 2 minutes. And I think if you take a look at the length of this video, you'll see we totally nailed it. Okay, all right, immigration. Okay, real quick, good or bad? Here we go, real quick. And go. So, first things first, how do you define an immigrant? Well, that's easy. An immigrant is a person who comes to New Zealand, but not for a holiday, unless it's a working holiday. Also, they can't have been born in New Zealand. Although New Zealanders coming back after living overseas do usually get counted in net migration figures, so that was slightly confusing, but okay, anyway, real quick, how do we know if people are just here for a holiday? Okay, well, we look at the arrival slips they fill out at the airport when they get here, and then we just assume that people are definitely going to do whatever they said they were going to do on their arrival slips, because humans can't lie, and no one has ever changed their mind about anything ever. Then there are people with long-term student visas who also count as immigrants, as well as skilled migrants and migrants with essential skills, who are apparently different, and then after a couple of years, some people can become residents of New Zealand. But are residents still immigrants, you ask? Well, that is also easy. Okay, you know what? Definitions are complicated. Guys, definitions are real hard, so let's not worry about definitions, okay? We're getting bogged down in the detail. Let's keep it snappy, real quick, good or bad, real quick. Okay, Andrew, next year, should we have more or fewer immigrants coming to New Zealand?
Fewer.
Great, okay, fewer, right, okay. If we want fewer people coming to our country, they must be bad for New Zealand. Okay, we did it. Immigrants are bad. They're bad for New Zealand, they're bad for the economy. Can we just cut to a clip of an economist to back that up? And we're done.
Migrants make a positive contribution economically and socially, and it's easy to see why. I mean, they have good employment outcomes, they have very low benefit uptakes, and they come here and they settle in really well.
Right. Okay, so this might take like an extra couple of minutes, but if we just think like Winston. Okay, maybe we do need to take a slightly closer look at some of the issues. So let's start with healthcare. Okay, common sense tells me that immigrants are clogging up our healthcare system. Okay, there's more people coming in, but the same amount of doctors and healthcare funding. So, okay, right. Interesting. Okay, it says here that on average immigrants are younger than our native population, so they're healthier. And because they're mostly working age, they pay more tax. So, turns out it's actually old people who are clogging up the hospitals. But that would mean that immigrants are good for healthcare funding. But healthcare's complicated. Okay, so don't worry about healthcare. What about housing? Okay, so common sense tells me that if there's more immigrants, there's more demand for housing. So prices go up. Okay, Okay, so there's not strictly a correlation between net migration in regions and rising house prices, but that's probably just because there's so many factors driving house prices up. You know, it's a complicated one. Jobs, though, okay, the high turnover rate of migrant labour definitely makes it easier for companies to keep their wages low. And there's also evidence that because people start buying things once they arrive in New Zealand, they create a demand for more stuff, which actually creates more jobs. Okay, look, guys, we're getting bogged down. We're getting bogged down in detail. Okay, we need to look at the big picture. Okay, real quick, good or bad, how much money overall, net, do migrants contribute to the New Zealand government? Okay, here we go. According to one study in 2013, migrants contributed a net $2.9 billion to the government, which averages out at $2,653 per person. That's nothing. I mean, what can you buy with $2,653? I mean, a 1999 Mitsubishi Chariot that's been modified into a camper van? Well, yes, obviously, we looked that one up in advance, but that's nothing. I mean, $2,653 is a tiny contribution. In that same year, patriotic, hard-working, native-born New Zealanders contributed per person $172. So, okay, never mind. Real quick, immigrants are good for the economy. Okay, they contribute more to the government than native-born New Zealanders. If anything, we need fewer native-borns. They're the ones sucking us dry, you know, what with their free education and health care and superannuation. Immigrants are young go-getters, and their sweet, sweet tax dollars offset the drain on the economy that is the native-born population. I mean, there's also the question of how many people our infrastructure can handle at any given moment. Unfortunately, we haven't figured out a way to put unsuccessful native-born babies sort of just back into the mother's womb. So immigration is our only way to control population size, and infrastructure does take time to build. But then, on the other hand, we can't ignore the fact that if we stop the flow of immigrants, we're also losing money that we could be using to invest in our infrastructure for tomorrow. So good. Real quick, on the whole, in the long term, immigrants are good for the economy. So, welcome, immigrants. Come to New Zealand. You're going to love it. We've got some lovely birds. We've got a fountain made almost entirely out of buckets. We've got a flag that isn't nearly as ugly as it could have been. And most importantly, we've got a thriving community of decent, honest employers willing to give you a decent, honest job, I assume. Okay, I mean, yes, okay. According to a University of Auckland study, some migrant hospitality workers are forced to work 12 or 18-hour shifts without breaks on $4 an hour, with threats of being reported to Immigration New Zealand if they complain. But that's hospo for you, you know? We've all been there. I mean, why don't you could just work in horticulture? Yeah, it says here that in the horticulture industry, migrant workers are routinely offered the minimum, on a less than the minimum wage. Didn't think that was legal. Okay, apparently some workers even describe their situation as being like prey in the eyes of contractors. Okay, but everything's fine. I mean, the opposition might not want you to come here, but the government is totally on your side. One former national MP said you guys were valuable members of the fruit-picking sector because, you have such tiny hands, so that's... Okay, you know what? Forget horticulture, fruit are dumb, guys. What about construction? Okay, there's plenty of work in Christchurch, if you don't mind living in Christchurch, eh? And being charged $145 a week for a single bed in a crowded flat that you share with 19 other migrant workers in Christchurch. Okay, so maybe maybe not construction. And to be honest, it's probably best if we just skip right over the details about the dairy industry. That's just trust me. But outside, hospitality, horticulture, fishing, construction, dairy industry, I'm sure there's a job for you somewhere where you won't be exploited by New Zealand businesses, probably. Even though people from the government aren't really monitoring that. So to sum up, real quick, immigration, good or bad? I don't know, good. I mean, it seems like it's slightly good for our economy long term, though it's not great for the immigrants who are exploited for cheap labour and ridiculous recruitment fees and per bed rents. But overall, I mean, you also have to think about, just real quick, how New Zealand is a colonised country and the settlers who came here imposed European concepts onto these Polynesian islands that were already inhabited with a whole multi-civilization. So why does this settler government somehow have the authority to ordain themselves controllers of a border that they made up in the first place to benefit themselves? Then there's the refugees. This is probably running longer than 2 minutes. Okay, real quick, good or bad, most economists seem to agree that A, immigration is a net positive over time, and B, however much you think immigration affects the economy, it's probably a lot less than that. Which is strange, because as we said at the start, people are really passionate about immigration. I mean, the evidence says that immigrants don't have a big impact on the economy, and the impact they do have is slightly positive. So why are people so passionate about immigration? What possible reason could there be for people feeling so passionately about a bunch of other cultures coming to our country? Well, I guess we'll never know.